My daughter's birthday weekends, plural, are now over. It's all gone. It's all done. It's in the past. And we can get back to the business of bringing you the best goddamn metal podcast on the internet. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Metal Hammer of Doom. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich, and I'd like to welcome back to the show my co-host, the author of the Metal Hammer of Doom column that you can read on 401mania.com. Folks, he is the Metal Coop, Robert Cooper. How do you do, sir?
Huh. So like I said before the show, I fucking miss this podcast.
Let me tell you something. When we we took a couple of weeks off, more than that, about a month or so, and we got together in the past week and a half and said, okay, well, what are we going to talk about in this podcast? And I'm not even kidding when I tell you that the only thing I've listened to that I, as far as new music goes, that I felt that I could talk about with any kind of authority was the Frozen soundtrack. Did you see Frozen?
I really want to, but I don't have like a younger sibling or a girlfriend to take. And seeing as I'm a 6'2" giant hairy white man, it looks a little awkward going to see children's movies by myself.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to build a snowman?
See, I know that song, but I've not heard the song. Like I love Disney, so if I saw that movie.
Do you want to build a snowman? Come on, let's go and play. I never see you anymore. Come on out the door. It's like you've gone away. We used to be best buddies, and now we're not. I wish you'd tell me why, Robert Cooper, why? Do you want to build a snowman? It doesn't have to be a snowman. Tell me to go away. Go on, tell me.
Okay, yes, I want to build a snowman, but only if I get
tell me, no, tell me to go away.
No, go away.
Okay, bye. This is the saddest thing I've ever heard, by the way. I have that stuck in my head because we listen to it all the time now because, I have a kid. But, and so I'll be walking through the jail and whatever, and I'll be like, do you want to build a snowman? Murderers are passing me. Do you want to build a snowman? And every time, Elsa says, go away, Anna. And Anna says, okay, bye. I'm like, oh, that makes me cry. And that is exactly why we're not going to talk about it on this podcast.
Well, I mean, hey, I will eventually, when I ever see the movie, I'm sure I will sing along with you because I love Disney songs. I find myself singing Colors of the Wind in the Walmart parking lot.
Well, there you go. All right. I've been wanting to do that bit all week, so thank you for indulging me. But we do have serious stuff to talk about tonight. What is going on in the world of music right now, Mr. Robert Cooper? Did Justin Bieber rob a bank or some shit? What's going on with him? I saw something. I got a fact or fiction question about the Biebs. Justin Bieber will avoid a jail sentence for his felony vandalism case. What did he do?
I don't know. Like, I don't care about Justin Bieber. He's not metal. But I guess to answer Joseph Lee's question, I'm pretty sure he's the guy who does the music fact fiction. Yes, he will because he's a celebrity.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, the kid that was little piece of shit, and I'd like him to fall down a flight of stairs. Only fall and get injured. Yeah, don't break anything.
So here's the thing. Like I said, we looked at what was out by the time this podcast was going to air, and I mean, and you tell me, you follow the stuff. Is there anything out right now that's even not necessarily worth doing a podcast over? We've already answered that question, but at least worth listening to?
I have actually I went and for my column I compiled all the new releases from the January 1st to, well, I guess it was yesterday. And really, there are some pretty solid picks, but it's nothing that's really big enough to warrant a podcast, like Ben Mechina, Legion of the Damned. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of EPs. But funny enough, after we had made this podcast, I went and looked on Spotify, and the new Iced Earth album was already out. I was like,
okay.
Son of a bitch, we could have done Iced Earth. I think it's because it's already out in Europe.
Well, we'll have to do that one next. I think our next, in 2 weeks, that's what we'll end up doing is the new Iced Earth album, correct?
Oh, yeah, that's what I assumed. And, well, after that, I wanted to do Grand Megas eventually, but I have no clue what's going to come after that because the Steel Panther album you wanted comes out in April.
We may not, if it comes out in April, we might not get to it. I might be on the Jonas hiatus by then.
Well, I know that's why I was like, oh, that would suck. Yeah, the Jonas-cation. We'll figure it out. Yeah, because unfortunately, unlike with how you and Sean work, we can't quite have everything planned out 3 months ahead because we don't find out things come out until 2 weeks before.
Yes, many times that is in fact the case. So, as I said, just to kind of get things rolling here, we Barry Manilow is playing at the Tampa Bay Times Forum Friday, January 31st. Maybe we should do a live podcast right from the Tampa Bay Times Forum. Huh? Barry Manilow? There's a group on
I'll call in my buddy. I'll call in my best friend Nick, who owns the Barry Manilow album. Has every Slayer album. Has like every Slayer album, every Sabbath album, every Megadeth album, and David Hasselhoff and Barry Manilow.
So, like I was saying, with nothing to review, we decided we would do a retrospective, and this is one that I've been wanting to do for a while now. I remember back when I was in, I think, the junior high, early high school. I've told the story before about how I grew up on mostly rap music because the town that I lived in was like 98% black. So I grew up on, and I'm a child of the 80s. So I grew up on East Coast rap, Run DMC, LL Cool J, before he was an actor, the Fat Boys, Beastie Boys, et cetera, et cetera. And when I moved to the white neighborhood when I was 12, the friends that I started to make started to introduce me to bands like Metallica and stuff, and eventually one of them hit me to a band called Slayer. And I absolutely fell in love with the band. And of course, my mother famously at the time asked me, since I was listening to Slayer, if I was going to get into Satan. And but like legit, it's not that wasn't, as they say in the wrestling industry, that was a shoot. She really thought that because I was simply listening to Slayer, the band, that I was going to start to worship Satan. She couldn't get me to go to a real church. Why would I go? Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, mine did the same thing when I'm like, my favorite band's Death. She goes, I don't think I like listening to that band. I'm like, that's the least of your worries.
Yeah, this is a very similar thing. But of all the bands that I've seen, Clutch definitely one of them. Typo Negative was one. Pantera. Slayer was probably the only other band that I saw like a zillion times over my 20-plus years of going to see concerts. Absolutely love Slayer. I get enthusiastic about them whenever they put out a new album, even if it sounds like every other Slayer album before it, and some of them will definitely fall into that trend. You just can't go wrong with angry, angry thrash metal. And, a couple years ago when they did the Big Four concert with Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer, They really were. They were the band for which the entire thrash genre rested upon. And without Slayer, you would, in my opinion, the thrash genre would have been missing one of its critical pillars. How did you come to Slayer?
My uncle. Yeah, my technically drunk uncle, the one that turned me on to Pantera and Anthrax and Metallica. Well, he didn't really turn me on to Slayer. He's not a huge Slayer guy. He claims they have no rhythm, which I'm like, oh, okay, have fun with your Disturbed album. But, yeah, he likes Disturbed. I don't get that. Like, it's just like a weird disconnect. But, yeah, I came through them, I guess, with his influence of metal, which is funny because nobody else in my family listens to metal or could give three shits about metal. Through that, and I guess that interest, as well as VH1 did a top 40 metal songs list, which at the time I thought was the gospel. Because, like, oh, yeah, it's got cool bands like Slipknot in it. Yeah, they were at like 36. But, like, they introduced me to Slayer and Sepultura and, like Dio's solo stuff. And a few, I think those were the main ones that they introduced me to. And I was just incredibly impressed. And I was like, wow, these guys are so heavy and dark. I was just like really digging them because, at the time I really loved some Metallica and starting to get into Megadeth. But like, Slayer were like the heaviest band ever at the time because they were so heavy they were near death metal. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the bands that really kind of influenced the death metal genre, you kind of do have to look at Slayer because how heavy they were for a thrash band. Like especially in America, it influenced a lot of the Florida death metal scene. At least I think so. Especially when you look at a band like Possessed, which came from I think they were a Florida thrash band, I think. But they took a lot of influence from Slayer, and then that band really, like pretty much like Possessed, it can be considered one of like a proto death metal band. Like it's really really kind of interesting. But yeah, I came through them just through Raining Blood and Angel of Death. And then I think Guitar Hero Metallica had War Ensemble. So then that became my new song. And then eventually it just kind of snowballed into just, me checking out all their stuff and, for better or worse, being pretty impressed. Just we'll get into this, I'm sure, during the podcast, but out of the rest of the big four, they were the most consistent with their sound. Like, until you hit Diabolus, they pure thrash. For better or worse.
I was going to say, Slayer has the dubious honor of only having one album that's truly terrible. Everything else either sounds like everything else or is awesome. And you're like, well, huh? Well, yeah, there was some stuff that they did that was truly groundbreaking and absolutely phenomenal for its time, and then they would make an album that sounds just like it. And you're like, oh, okay. There was not a lot of experimentation with Slayer.
Well, yeah, I don't feel like they needed experimentation. Like, there's some bands like Amon Amarth and Motorhead and AC/DC. Like, for the most part, you know what you're going to get, but that's fine. Like, some bands I'll give shit because, that sounded just like last album. And it just doesn't really give as much of an impact. But a band like Slayer, even when you do have diminishing returns, it's still better than, a lot of, like, kind of the backwoods podunk thrash bands that you'll find. And really, I feel like it's sad because thrash has seen a revival to a lot of the larger bands. It's not as much of a growing genre as, say, death metal. Like, thrash has maybe 3 or 4 albums on my top 50, and death metal's got, like, 20. All the other genres are kind of smattered in there throughout, but I find Slayer to be one of the stalwarts of, no matter how bad things get, unless it's 1998, Slayer will always be playing thrash.
One last thing, and then we're going to start talking about the albums, in particular, and play some music. As we all know, if you listen to this podcast long enough, you'll know that I like to mosh. I think I still would. Almost 40 years old. I don't have the opportunities like I used to, but on the occasion that I do go to a show, I will hoist my old ass into the pit, and do my thing.
When you're not asleep.
When I'm not asleep, yes. What are you, my wife? She was mad at me earlier because I was starting to fall asleep on the couch. It's like, damn it, I work hard. In any case, I remember just being a kid, and I promise I'm not going to go into sad white boy tales, but I will say that moshing to Slayer was my happy place, because they were, because Pantera didn't come around all that much. That's what I mean.
When they hit the South, they'd probably be hitting places closer to the South, since that's really more up there, I guess, the hotbed of where they are. More
yeah,
like southern.
Pantera would come around like once on a tour, and then you'd never see him again. Slayer would come around like 5 times. They were relentless tourers. It's one of the things I really loved about the band. And they always played with. I remember the one that sticks out in my mind, it was Slayer, Biohazard, and Machine Head. It was like every kid who ever liked any band off a Roadrunner record was there in New York City. And I also remember that was the night of the Jimmy Buffett show at Madison Square Garden. So you had this convergence of sweaty death metal listening metalheads with a bunch of parrot heads all on the Long Island Railroad. That made for some fun conversation. But yeah, I
forgot Roadrunner used to do death metal.
Yeah, and Machine Head and I don't remember if Biohazard was on Roadrunner or not, but I know Machine Head was. And that label was the thing once upon a time. But I know there are some people listening tonight who are fans of the show who are not tremendously familiar with Slayer. So
hi, Jesse.
Yeah, hi, Jesse. This is an opportunity to sort of get a smattering, and it really is a smattering, because if we played you every great Slayer song, we would be here all night. My suggestion is listen to this podcast, enjoy it, digest it, play it for your child when they're trying to take a nap. It worked wonders for my kid, and it's true. I would not turn down the metal music when she was napping, and now she can sleep through fireworks, earthquakes, what you name it. Kid sleeps through everything. Parenting, I'm good at it. In any case, when this podcast is done and you've listened to it and you've played it for your sleeping child, go set yourself up with a Spotify account and listen to all their albums. You will not be sorry. All right, so Slayer is one of your early '80s thrash bands, and their first studio album is Show No Mercy. It comes out in 1983. I am 7 when this thing comes out, by the way. 7 years old.
I am not even, I'm like -8.
You have to remember, thrash metal was a stark contrast to the kind of metal that was popular in the early 80s. You had a lot of like the progressive metal, the epic, 8-minute songs, and Iron Maiden doing these huge stage shows, which as I've talked about in the past, this is the sort of thing that gave rise to the punk rock movement of the 70s. And punk was political. You looked at like the Sex Pistols, but punk was also sort of a middle finger at the overblown rock and roll stage show and metal stage show. So punk's out there for a while, and and the thing of it is that punk, in some people's eyes, didn't have enough balls to it. There were people who loved metal and were excellent musicians and could do more than just play 2 or 3 chords like you would in traditional punk. And they wanted to sort of take all of that and create a harder, faster, edgier kind of punk rock music. And that gave rise to the thrash movement. And Show No Mercy, Slayer's first studio album, 1983, clocks in at 35 minutes and 2 seconds. And it is probably a great primer in what traditional old-school thrash sounds like. We've got songs on here like The Antichrist, Die by the Sword, Fight Till Death. These are all fantastic songs, none of which you will hear tonight. But they are probably 3 of my favorite Slayer songs by a large country mile. So let's go ahead and listen to a song that Robert was great. He put up all the music tonight, and because I was sort of asleep at the wheel, I let him pick all the music. So he picked, and we'll find out why in just a moment, he picked a song called Black Magic from the album Show No Mercy. That song is awesome. Not entirely sure why they went with the echo effect, but go ahead and tell us why, of all the songs, if you could just pick one for Show No Mercy, you went with Black Magic.
I think it's because it's the one that really sticks with me the most. To be honest, when I first got into Slayer, I didn't know there was anything before Rain in Blood, sorry, because, you know, I was coming more from a more mainstream approach to Slayer, which focuses on stuff like pretty much from Rain in Blood to, Seasons usually, and a lot of the hype is around Rain in Blood and South of Heaven. But, you know, the first song I heard from the older Slayer was Black Magic, and it blew me away, especially because going through Show No Mercy for the first time in forever yesterday, I was sitting in the computer lab at the college I go to. Hilarious. I'm the only white boy at that college. I'm listening to Slayer. Oh, yeah, it's an HBCU, so I stick out, and it's funny. But, I was sitting there just listening to the album again, and really Black Magic is a song that stands out because it is slightly different with the way that it builds. Like, the build almost reminds me of Hit the Lights or, something like Hit the Lights, and after that build-up, it kind of reminds me of something that would come from more like a new wave of British heavy metal band with the kind of more of a medium sort of build to it before it hits fucking Slayer. And it's a song that I think encompasses this album really well. You've got Tom Araya and his crazy ass, like, ghastly screams. Seriously, that man is my hero for that. He's got that. The guitar works really, really good. I find the song to be incredibly catchy. And it's one of those, like, no matter what I'm looking for in a song, like, I'm like, oh, I want to listen to some Doom, I'll throw in Black Magic, and I'll just be like, Black Magic Night. I'm just like, fuck it, why not? I mean, it's kind of hard. I think it was kind of hard to pick a song off Show No Mercy because, like, hell, evil has no boundaries. The Antichrist, died with a sword. Fuck. Like, they're all just great.
They play, having been to see Slayer, as I said, dozens of times, they play a lot of Die by the Sword and the Antichrist in concert. I actually remember waiting. Like, we're going to listen to it a little bit later, but, like, Chemical Warfare.
Oh, I forgot that album.
War Ensemble. I used to wait for those because they were at the time that I'm seeing them. This is about when Divine Intervention comes out. So, so the Show No Mercy, Hell Awaits era stuff, was their old stuff, and they would focus on the newer stuff, and I would absolutely refuse to leave the venue until they played the Antichrist or Die by the Sword. It was good stuff, and they usually did, and they were definitely crowd favorites. And you listen to the construction of that song. You had your gallop. You had your typical kind of thrash sound. Like I said, the only thing that's weird about that is, and it's very different from the way Slayer normally records their stuff, is for some odd reason they threw out this echo effect on Tom Araya's vocals, which I find that distracting.
It is a bit weird. I think it might have been this album because the production on this album in comparison to the rest of them is really almost like I guess it's because they didn't have any fucking money at the time. It's almost like it reminds me of like some of the black metal stuff where it's really minimalist. Like there's nothing really, like no touch-ups or anything. It's very kind of bleak and stark and just in your face.
Yeah, from what I understand, they used Old Man McGee's tape recorder that he had in his house, and they just kind of played on his front lawn, and whatever he picked up was their album. So I understand all that. But their next, once they got popular off of Show No Mercy, they were able to actually get a budget going for an actual well-recorded studio album, and that brings us to 1985, Hell Awaits. And I'll tell you, if you don't listen to any other song off this album, though Necrophiliac's pretty good, you definitely need to listen to the title track, which is, of course, Hell Awaits. Every song has a slow build. So that sounded like the soundtrack to an army of demons marching upon you.
It's a pretty fair summation.
But I think that, the thing about Slayer is they never strayed too far from what made them attractive to at least a rather large but still niche audience of music lovers, and that was they delved into if you didn't really like heavy metal and you wanted to make fun of it, you always drew upon the references to Satan, and I remember there was a guy who was like, "Hey, look, I'm going to write a heavy metal song." This is back when I was in junior high. He was like, "Kill your mother, kill your father, run your sister over with a blazer,"
yeah.
And
now with the code.
In case you didn't understand. But yeah, it's easy to sort of poke fun at heavy metal, and Slayer is one of those reasons why, because they focus so much on themes of Satanism and especially with the next album, Nazism. And it's not that they were proponents of any of these things, but they were interesting subjects. Not a lot of people were delving into them and writing songs about them and exploring them, and what they meant to the culture. So it made them stand out. And as far as imagery went, it worked, and people bought into it, and people liked it, and adopted it as part of their own persona. But and Hell Awaits definitely lends itself to all of that.
Yeah, it's like the song Hell Awaits pretty much. It's like it kicks the door in from what the first album was. The first album sounded like it was recorded in Oscar the Grouch's trash can, and opening this album was something that kind of brings some anticipation. You're like, oh, okay, it's kind of quiet at first. What's going to happen? And then you hear these just demonic vocals just coming about, and then you hear that big, muscly, meaty riff come, and just kind of stick around for a while just to make sure that it's the big dog in the house, and then we start the song, with all the riffs and everything. I feel like that this is, I don't want to say it's their coming out party, but I feel like this is this album establishes Slayer as what Slayer does. Because like the first album was almost like proto-Slayer. Like, yeah, here is early Slayer, here's what they can do. But this album really kind of establishes their sound and how they're going to sound for more or less the rest of their career.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where, like, if you want to point to a song, what does Slayer sound? Well, it sounds like that. It's, and I remember when they would play Hell Awaits live, people would absolutely lose their minds. This was absolutely a crowd favorite.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see why. And I feel like stuff like that, big meaty riffs. As much as I love them, I feel like sometimes it is to their detriment, because you do have the fucking Slayer fans, the ones that will the big muscle, kind of like the equivalent of your tap out shirt guys for the MMA crowd. It's pretty much the same guy. He's like, yeah, fucking Slayer, best band ever. Yeah.
It lended itself to being appreciated by muscleheads. Yes, it was very aggressive music.
Yeah, I always find that funny because, like, I love Slayer, but sometimes those, Slayer guys, I'm like, go away. Don't you have something else to go do?
So, Woodstock. Primus is playing. I believe it was Primus. And, Les Claypool likes to noodle on the bass. He just likes to tone it down a notch, bring it down. Guitarist and the drummer stop playing, and he's just noodling on his bass. It gets very quiet. It's very quiet. Yes. It's very quiet. Hush comes over the crowd. They're wondering, are we ever going to get to My Name is Mud? And he just starts to whisper. Slayer's coming, in that Les Claypool voice of his. The crowd erupts, and then he gets a little bit louder. Slayer's coming! And the crowd goes insane. And then he belts out, Slayer! And the crowd is screaming back at him. This is during a Primus set. Slayer! Might not have been Woodstock now that I think about it. It might have been Lollapalooza. But either way, I can't keep track of all these shows. But whatever big stage show, festival, Primus and Slayer were both on, that happened. I was there for it. Which means it definitely wasn't Woodstock. But in any case...
Woodstock, wasn't that the one where everybody had a riot and shit?
That was the second one. That was the second one where tickets were $5 million. They charged $10 million for water, and everyone burnt the fucking place down. But that's a whole other podcast. In any case, it's the power of Slayer, right? Even other bands were like, "Yeah, Slayer!" It was one word. It rolls right off the tongue. It sounds tough. People love it, and they love the band. And there's, and it's become sort of a mocking thing now. But there was a time where it was just a great cathartic thing to just scream Slayer as loud as you can.
I do like that. I do sometimes wonder if I ever showed up to a Slayer show, if I can get a call and response of fucking Slayer.
No one will hear the fucking part. All you will hear is Slayer. I mean, first, if you walk up to somebody in the mall and just go, Slayer, you will instantly make a friend. Or you will be arrested. One of the two. There's only two responses you can get to screaming Slayer in someone's face.
Usually it's either, there's three. Mace, because, sometimes the cops just can't get it. Just can't get it fast enough. Shh, get out of my face. They're like, oh my God, it's Slayer. I feel bad because we forgot the Haunting of the Chapel EP.
Yeah, we're only doing full albums.
Well, it counts. It's got three of the best songs ever, isn't it? Like Chemical Warfare, Haunting the Chapel, and Just as an Aggressor, right? Is it Just as an Aggressor? I mean, I'm not sure.
And now you mentioned them.
Well, there you go. No, I feel like that should be your favorite cover because I feel like that should be your favorite Slayer song because it's Priest cover.
There you go. So the next song we're going to hear is by Tori Amos, and it's
Oh, you!
We have
to did there.
we do have to talk about that though. We will be talking about that in just a few minutes, but let's get right to the point here. 1 year after Hell Awaits, they put out another studio album. This is October 1986. Clocks in at 29 minutes and 3 seconds. All 10 songs of it, by the way. 10 songs, 29 minutes. Tells you about how fast these fucking things go. We get probably the album. This is their Master of Puppets. This is the. In fact, here I'll read you from the Wikipedia page. Rain and Blood is the third studio album and major label debut of American thrash metal band Slayer. It was released October 7th, 1986 on Def Jam Recordings. Def Jam that brought you LL Cool J. The album was
and Def Jam Vendetta.
The album was the band's first collaboration with producer Rick Rubin, whose input helped the band's sound evolve. Rain and Blood was well received by both critics and fans and was responsible for bringing Slayer to the attention of the mainstream metal audience. Kerrang! Magazine described the record as the heaviest album of all. Alongside Anthrax, Among the Living, Megadeth's Pete Sells, But Who's Buying, and Metallica's Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood helped define the sound of the emerging U.S. thrash metal scene in the 1980s and has remained influential subsequently. Yeah, this is one of those albums that has held up over the last 30 years. Absolutely. People still cite Rain and Blood as an influence. And there's a particular song on here, the opening song, that to this day bands will cover, bands will cite as an influence. It is the Master of Puppets. It is the high watermark for Slayer. And if you listen to no other song in your life, listen to the following Slayer song. This is Angel of Death. They would save that song usually for last at a lot of their tours, because after which you would have to start peeling people off the ground and helping them onto stretchers and wheelchairs and such. People would lose their freaking minds. That song is the equivalent of like in MMA where, you know, someone catches you with a right hand, you're on Queer Street, and you're not going to admit any more offense for the rest of the fight. You're going to receive punch after punch after punch. You're going to end up on your back, and you're going to get pounded on the face until your tongue falls out of your mouth, and they have to stop the fight. That is the musical equivalent of that. It just doesn't stop. It is relentless violence. It's just an amazing song.
This song is the equivalent of Edson Barbosa's spinning wheel kick. It's just like, well, here it comes. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck, what did I just hear? That is the greatest fucking thing I ever seen. Let's play it again. I mean, pretty much, like, this is the Slayer song. The riff is memorable.
This is the Master of Puppets.
Oh, yeah, Master is my favorite Metallica song. Yeah, even the Master of Puppets isn't my favorite Metallica album. Oh, well, that's another album for another podcast. Yeah, this is actually a pretty cool song, especially when you consider, like, the subject material is pretty dark. It's about, Joseph Mengele.
Yeah. It's so for people who don't know, this song is about the Nazi war experiments conducted by Josef Mengele. And, I mean, you know, nobody in the band condoned Nazism. And we talked about this. We talked about this on the I forget which podcast it was. I think we might have been a Monomarth. It was one there where what's his face from 411 was on, and we started talking about like what? Yeah, no, not Sean Comer.
Sean Garmer.
Yeah, Garmer.
Yeah.
We started talking about rap kind of tends to stay in the same wheelhouse. Very rarely does anyone sort of leave the comfort of bitches, bitches, drugs, and money. But metal, rock and roll, explores almost an infinite range of topics, and there's nothing inherently wrong with a band deciding that they're gonna, look at this sort of stuff and sort of talk about what it means and what it's all about and whatever. I can see, when your opening line is Auschwitz the way I want you to die, someone might get the wrong idea. Someone might think you're anti-Semitic, but it's that they weren't, and that's not, and I've enjoyed Slayer since I was in high school, and I've never once listened to them and thought, wow, geez, these guys, they mean to do harm to people. It's music, and I think music can be daring, and I would definitely say that this was daring.
Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, there's a documentary, I don't know if I ever mentioned it, called Global Metal. It was done by the same dude who did Metal Headbanger's Journey, actually. Pretty solid stuff. And he goes around the world and looks at like places like Israel and like Malaysia, places where you wouldn't, that have huge metal scenes and you wouldn't really expect it in some of those places. And they talked to actually the vocalist of Orphan Land. Love that band. And, they mentioned Angel of Death, and he's like, I know they didn't mean anything, but, it's because he's Jewish. He's like, that's still a really sore subject. Pretty much that's just what it boiled down to. He's like, I know they didn't mean any harm, but it still really hurts. I'm like, oh, he's like, I just don't like that song. I feel he feels it's a bit disrespectful, which I'm like, I can see where he's coming from, but really it's just more telling a story. Hell, I wouldn't know about this guy if it weren't for this song.
So I'm going to read from the wiki page again. For the album, Slayer decided to abandon much of the earlier satanic themes explored in their previous album, Hell Awaits, and write about issues that were more on a street level. Rain in Blood's lyrics include meditations on death, anti-religion, which they would do again and again and again, insanity, murderers, and while the lead track, Angel of Death, details human experiments conducted at the Auschwitz concentration camp by Josef Mengele, who was dubbed the Angel of Death by inmates. The song led to accusations of Nazi sympathizing and racism, which have followed the band throughout their career. Hanneman, who just recently passed away, was inspired to write Angel of Death after he read a number of books on Mengele during a Slayer tour. Hanneman has complained people usually misinterpret the lyrics and clarified, nothing I put in the lyrics that says necessarily he was a bad man, because to me, well, isn't that obvious? I shouldn't have to tell you that. And he's absolutely right. Do we really have to spell these things out? Auschwitz, the way that I want you to die, is a terrible thing. Come on. There has to be some room for sort of artistic play here.
Well, I mean, it's the same reason why there's buckets saying do not put head in full bucket of water. Jackass has to tell people not to do this at home because people are stupid.
Okay, so
pretty much.
So let's we're gonna play another song off this album, this monumental album which launched Slayer into the stratosphere, such as it was. And that is the title track. Once again, this is called. And after this, we're gonna talk about. We have to talk about the Tori Amos cover. This is Raining Blood. imagine, if you will, the 10-year anniversary of Rain and Blood. Rain and Blood. And I'm at the Roseland Ballroom. Slayer is touring, again, celebrating the 10-year anniversary of this album. And what they did was, and this would be done by a lot of bands after, they played the album straight through. And then they took a break, and then they came out and they did another set of, various songs throughout their career. But first they just played the album straight through. And I remember when they got to Rain and Blood, the place was already pretty dark, but the lights went completely out, and then only lights that came up were red lights. And they started the song, and all you saw on the stage, once they got to the Rain and Blood from a Lacerated Sky, was just buckets of red liquid raining down on the band. It's probably one of the coolest visuals I've ever seen at a metal show. Without having to go crazy and do like a Marilyn Manson kind of a thing, or one of these bands that go all hypersexual. They just stood there and let themselves be doused in essentially red paint, to sort of celebrate Raining Blood. It was quite the spectacle.
That sounds amazing.
It really was.
Why couldn't have I been there? Oh, wait, I was like 5, probably 4, yeah. Which funny thing.
In 1996?
Yeah, I was born in 91, and I was born in December of 91, so.
Okay,
so
you were young.
The funny thing, I looked at Show No Mercy on Metal Archives. It came out on December 3rd, just like me.
You are intrinsically linked to Slayer.
And Ozzy Osbourne, because that's Ozzy's birthday.
There are lots of great tracks on Rain and Blood. Obviously, Angel of Death and Raining Blood are the two big ones, but Necrophobic is good. Altar of Sacrifice is good. Jesus Saves when they play constantly. I think they've played Postmortem at a lot of different shows. So, Rain and Blood, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, it is like, it is kind of like Master of Puppets or, Peace Cells. Like, okay, what does Slayer sound like? Ta-da! And it won't even take you long to get through it. See, that's the beauty of it. And they don't need long, because Slayer doesn't need like 10-minute tracks. No, they're going to punch you in the balls with guitars and thrash, and, let you cry in your corner as they keep playing, because they're awesome.
All right, so in 2001, Tori Amos put out an album of covers. Now, for those of you who don't know what a Tori Amos is, she's a singer-songwriter. She plays the piano, and that's kind of her thing. I mean, occasionally she'll have a backup band, but she got big on just doing piano songs. And like I said, 2001, she released Strange Little Girls, which she did piano covers of Eminem's Bonnie and Clyde, whatever the full name of the song is. She did 97 Bonnie and Clyde. She did Enjoy the Silence by Depeche Mode. She did Heart of Gold by Neil Young. I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. Happiness is a Warm Gun by the Beatles. And she covered Slayer.
What?
Yeah, kind of. And look, I loves me a good cover, and I especially can appreciate when you completely deconstruct a song and play it in a way where you almost don't recognize what it once was. Various interpretations on a song. I mean, the problem with a lot of covers is they tend to do it note for note, and it ends up being like a shot-for-shot reshoot of a movie. This was not that. Again, from the wiki, Raining Blood was covered by Tori Amos on her 2001 album Strange Little Girls. Kerry King has admitted that he thought the cover was odd. It took me a minute and a half to find a spot in the song where I knew where she was. It's so weird. If she had ever told us, we would have never have known. You could play it for us, and we'd been like, what's that? Like a minute and a half through, I heard a line that was like, I know where she's at. The band, however, liked the cover enough to send Slayer t-shirts to Tori Amos. By the way, if you ever have an opportunity to hear, I want to say it's Hammer Smash Face combined with...
Oh, the lounge version?
No.
The Disney version?
No, it's Tori Amos doing I think she's like reading a PSA about a rape victim line, rape help victim line, and it goes into like Hammer Smash Face.
I thought you were referencing the somebody took like Hammer Smash Face and like I think they took Raining Blood and pretty much turned it into what it would sound like if it were on Radio Disney. Everything sounds like a damn. It is hilarious, especially like Raining Blood, because everything goes from like kind of heavy to like it almost sounds like everything's done on a fucking MIDI piano, and like all the acoustics, and there's this guy doing bright singing and everything. I'm like, it's fucking catchy.
All right, so for people listening, I have 2 homework assignments for you. One is if you have not, go on Spotify, or go on YouTube. And I'm not asking you to spend any money here, but go to one of those places and do yourself a huge service. Listen to listen to Rain and Blood the whole way through if you haven't heard it. Then go compare it to the Tori Amos version of Raining Blood. It will blow your underwear off. That's for certain. But the other thing you should do is go on YouTube and Google Christmas lights and Raining Blood. You will not be disappointed.
Oh yeah, that dude has been doing it like every year.
Yeah.
For Slayer Bob, he did one this year.
Yeah, and he went back into Slayer again to celebrate the life and memorialize the death of Jeff Hanneman, who died this past year. So he did up his house in Slayer lights again. It was it was fun. The lights themselves were nothing to speak of, but it was fun. All right, so keeping the things moving along here, 1988. 2 years later, they continue to evolve their sound. They continue to sound more professional, more slick, more sleek, more tight. And in that vein, they produce another hit album for the people who enjoy this sort of music. I don't want to make them sound like they were Barry Manilow or anything, but
oh God, I'm pretty sure Kerry King would jump through his computer screen and beat you just for mentioning that.
Suffice it to say, it got great reviews. We are, of course, talking about the album South of Heaven. And South of Heaven's got a lot of good stuff on it. Right now, we're going to take a moment, and we're going to play for you the title track while I take a sip of tea because I'm losing my voice. This is, of course, South of Heaven, another big-time crowd favorite. you want to hear the rest of that solo in the middle there, please go, by all means, go back and listen to it. But let's talk a little bit about South of Heaven and how it was distinctly different from a lot of the earlier tracks. Slowed down, they took their time with it. There's a good build. Still a very heavy song, definitely a crowd favorite, crowd pleaser, but not your typical Slayer thrash.
Ah, son of a bitch, fucking cat. Sorry, my little kitten just latched onto my foot. But actually, I find this whole album to be really refreshing in a way. Like, this is not a hugely thrashy album in comparison, like Rain and Blood, which was, like, I think clocking like 220 beats per minute, like average. Like, this one took it took a lot of time to kind of build up and build a real atmosphere around it, which, I really think shows Hanneman and King's skill at crafting a song, because, before, a lot of people just think of them as, they're just those guys that make a few riffs and just keep playing. No, I mean, they can build a really great atmosphere. I mean, this song, every time I hear it, it's like a little bit of dread goes over me, and I'm just like, oh, I love it. So, I mean, it's just such a great job, especially if you've seen, like, I haven't seen it live, but I've seen, like, live videos where they'll have, like, a cross, and then as the song starts, it'll slowly turn upside down. I'm like, that is so cool.
All right, I want to read this to you. Aware that they couldn't top Rain and Blood, and that whatever they recorded will be compared to that album, Jeff Hanneman believed that they had to slow down, something Slayer had never done in albums before or since guitarist Kerry King cited the need to keep people guessing as another reason for the musical shift. In order to contrast the aggressive assault put forth on Rain and Blood, Slayer consciously slowed down the tempo of the album as a whole, according to Slayer's official biography. They also added elements of undistorted guitars and toned-down vocal styles not heard on previous albums. Would you agree or disagree with their prediction that had they tried to top Rain and Blood, or if they had sort of thoughtlessly recorded the next album, they would have run the risk of alienating fans, as they would have inevitably compared South of Heaven to Rain and Blood, and it would have resulted in negative feedback?
I don't quite think I don't think it would quite alienate people, because really after that they've been doing that. And South of Heaven gets compared to Rain and Blood still by a lot of people, what's the better album. But I feel like if they wouldn't have done this, it wouldn't have we wouldn't have gotten this album, which is, I think, honestly, I like it more than Rain and Blood, because it takes more time to build things up. And while Rain and Blood is still a masterpiece, I feel like this one is on the same level. And I think that the fact that this was like that different album, I think it really helps make Seasons in the Abyss even better too, because it's kind of like one of those, we were balls to the wall, and then we kind of reined it in a little, showed you what we could do, and then back to balls to the wall thrash. I kind of feel like it was a really smart business decision on their part, because it would have been different if they didn't have the chops to pull it off. And, they just kind of implode because, they were a really shitty album. Well, no, they did a great job with it, and I think they handled it very well. That's pretty much how I see it. Like, it might have been compared even more to Rain and Blood, and, it might not have, it might not have lasted as long in the minds of the fans as Sound of Heaven has, but Slayer were on their ball then, too, so I don't think they were going to release them some dud.
Yeah, they really, they would continue to release album after album of just hot fire. They really don't run into a problem until they hit Diablos and Musica, which we'll get to shortly. Some other great songs on here: Silent Scream, which was about abortion, I believe. Big hit with the Slayer fans. Mandatory Suicide.
That one's so good.
That's one where, again, everyone kills each other in the pit. But here's one that I don't necessarily recall hearing live. It's one that you picked, one we're going to play right now. This is called Spill the Blood. Okay. Why Spill the Blood?
I don't know. I always felt like it was one of the catchier songs on the album. Like, it kind of does the same thing that...
catchier than Wait a minute. Catchier than Mandatory Suicide?
I mean, that one... Remember with the fly swatter stakes are pretty catchy. I said one of, though. I said one of the. So technically that includes Mandatory Suicide.
Okay.
But I don't know. I just always felt like this. I have a weird affinity to some of like the lesser, to maybe some of the more fillery tracks.
Your 2013 was the year of fun time, Robert Cooper. 2014 is starting to sound like this is the year of deep cuts, Robert Cooper.
Yeah, deep cuts. Oh yeah. Well, hey, I still introduce myself as Mr. Funtime, though. Yes, deep cuts. Well, hey, read my top 10 list. That is actually lots of deep cut albums. But yeah, I just kind of feel like that song's one of those. I guess it's kind of underappreciated. It is really catchy with it is a really slower, kind of just a more like, what's the word? No, not lethargic. That's not a good word. Oh, well, I can't think of the word. Just kind of like I don't want to say typical pace. Something that's kind of like automatic. It's like, just kind of going along. But then also like the little guitar flourishes of like da-da-da-da. Like, that seems to catch me. I just really enjoy this song. And, maybe I should have put Mandatory Suicide instead. But I feel like this song really does hold up. And is one of the best songs in the album. I think it was the closer, actually.
Yes, it's track 10.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of being a good closer and really kind of bringing a nice contrast to what we get next.
So we're starting to enter a period now where the albums are getting longer and longer. This next one, 1990s release, Seasons in the Abyss, clocks in at 42 minutes and 27 seconds. The last one was 36 minutes. So, we go from like 25 minutes to 42 minutes. We've got some longer songs here. Specifically, songs like another crowd favorite, Dead Skin Mask, which clocks in at 5 minutes and 20 seconds, and of course the title track, which we're going to listen to right now, Seasons in the Abyss. So here we have an example of the very rare but truly exciting quality of Slayer's later music, and that is melody. Actually, there was melody, there was harmony. They weren't just playing for speed and aggression. They constructed a real song there. It was fantastic.
Yeah. I feel like this is really just kind of like an extension of what they did with South of Heaven, while still kind of like, songs like War Ensemble still kind of harkening back to Rain and Blood.
And we're going to get to that in just a minute.
Yeah, because I uploaded that track too. I feel like it does a really good job. This album just does a great job of, kind of having little bits of everything that they've done, which is really kind of nice. At least I think so. I also love that this was the lead single and was on Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, actually, I was just reading that. This got substantial airplay on MTV's Headbangers Ball, Seasons in the Abyss. And it was their first, and Seasons in the Abyss is actually features their first music video by Slayer. This also inspired the band SOD to release a single named Seasoning the Obese.
Oh, yes. I love Seasoning the Obese.
Yes.
That's actually what I think of half the time when I think of the album.
Good stuff.
Because the album cover of the fat guy's face having like the shit dropped on it.
So
food dropped in it.
Yeah, as I said, Seasons in the Abyss continues the evolution of the band, the maturity of the band. Now they've been doing this for about 10 years or so, and because they re-released the album in 1994, and I'll tell you what, it deserves a lot of the praise that it gets, but just because they could slow it down at times and experiment, they can go too far off the beaten path, but they would certainly it wasn't the same song over and over and over again. There was still plenty of traditional angry thrash to be had. This is actually one of my personal favorites. Maybe it'll be yours too. Yet another song where every time they played it, there was violence and heaping spoonfuls of it. This is War Ensemble. As a pit breaks out, and people form a circle, and people mosh within the pit, and for the most part, they don't get much bigger than that, and people on the outside are can be pretty safe, especially if you're a few rows back from the main area of the pit. War Ensemble was one of those where there was no safe place to be had. they start to play War Ensemble, and you were getting a pit was going to break out around you, whether you liked it or not. And there was nowhere for you to go other than maybe outside the venue. I remember, I think I saw Slayer and Chimera play together at Irving Plaza, and they played that, and the whole floor erupted in one massive pit. Girls were losing boyfriends. Clothing was being torn. And I remember at one point I had my arm up in front of my face, and I was just throwing my hands in a circle and everything. And one guy, and it was like a massive wave of violence. And then, people were like running for the for the fucking corner of the building. So there was a lot of space. And I remember one person actually grabbed me by my shoulder and like, "It's okay, it's over now." Like, oh, good. You can relax.
Well, I mean, yeah.
That was also the same show where I did some sort of like jumping maneuver and I got hit. And you would have thought, and this looked like it should have came right out of Sports Center, some sort of football highlight. I got hit in midair, and I did a spiral and dropped like straight down. It looked very cartoonish, but War Ensemble. I mean, what is there to say about it other than that's Slayer, all right?
Oh yeah, like I feel like this was the perfect song to come out of the gate with. Another one it is really catchy, with especially with the chorus. The war is war, total war. Yeah, because the final swing is not a drill; it's just how many people I can kill. I'm like, oh, I missed you, Slayer. Where have you been? Yeah, and this was the one that put on Guitar Hero Metallica, fittingly enough, which is actually what got me into this song. Because Guitar Hero Metallica they got me into Merciful Fate too, because they had King Diamond in that game. True story, they did. Yeah.
So moving on to 1994. Now at this point, I have this is September 27th, 1994. And I believe this is my senior year of high school. This is actually when This is, I think, when I really got into Slayer. I think up to this point, I had heard some stuff, but Nirvana was out during this time, and Kurt Cobain hadn't been murdered yet. So, I think I was more obsessed with Pantera and Sepultura. But when Divine Intervention came out, it was the first release by Slayer at a time when I was aware of the band and I was going to shows. So this is the album that I most own in terms of being a fan. I really enjoy this album, and there's a great line here in the Wikipedia page. AllMusic said that instead of doing something calculated like emulating Nirvana or Pearl Jam, remember, this is 1994. We are thick in the middle of the grunge revolution. By the way, the grunge revolution, worst phrase for a music genre ever. Alternative, grunge, that whole period where people sought to define the music coming out of Seattle, college radio stations, was just terrible. It's just, they didn't know what to call any of this shit. All we knew is that there was a sound rejection of the late '80s hair metal, and what you got were bands like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Screaming Trees, all that stuff. The Melvins. So
Melvin.
You had all these bands coming out of the Pacific Northwest. And no one knew what the hell to call any of it. Plus you had some of the post-punk bands like Nirvana, again, who were also from Seattle. So there was just this mesh of new music that was becoming popularized. And a lot of bands, I mean, remember, 1992, where Metallica releases the Black Album, which historically was a huge departure from the traditional Metallica sound. We talked about with Megadeth, with their 90s stuff being a huge departure from the Peace Sells era. So you had, Anthrax at this point lost its singer. This was the John Bush era. So there was a lot of
groovy.
Yes, and then they went all groovy. So there's a lot of change happening in music. So it was comforting that one of the constants was that Slayer wasn't changing shit. Slayer was Slayer was Slayer. Except for, well, even with the change in drummers, they were not changing their sound at all. So I want to read this to you. All Music said that instead of doing something calculated like emulating Nirvana or Pearl Jam, or for that matter, Nine Inch Nails or Ministry, Slayer wisely refused to sound like anyone but Slayer. Tom Araya and Co. Tom Araya and Co. responded to the new environment simply by striving to be the heaviest metal band they possibly could. By the album's release date, vocalist Tom Araya considered to be their best album. And, Divine Intervention was not a bad album, not by a long shot. My personal favorite on here we're not going to play tonight. That is Ditto Head. It's got a really, really fun middle of the song, but we are in fact going to go ahead and play the title track because that is what Rob uploaded. So here we go. This is Divine Intervention. I have to. So for people listening to this show, this isn't going to make a tremendous amount of sense, but we have a handful of fans and a handful of fellow writers who like to tune into the show and give feedback as the show is going on, which is awesome, by the way. Occasionally, like I'll have a brain fart and like Robert Winfrey will send me messages saying, "Oh, it's fucking Matt Damon." Okay, so that's great. So I'm talking with somebody now. I'll throw a shout out there, Jesse Starcher, and he wrote to me on Facebook. He was like, "I've never been in a pit I'm the guy pushing Mark back in when they play he mentioned Rats by Clutch. Let me say this. I'm going to say it to you, Robert Cooper, which I have said before, but I'm going to say it again. And to Jesse Starcher and to anyone listening to this podcast, if you have never been in a mosh pit, like in the middle of a good one, I don't mean one of these faggy, fucking circle pits that people do. I mean, the kind of pit where you expect to see some guy running across with a TV in his hand. That's a real mosh pit, okay? I'm talking about, the kind of thing where you don't know whether you're coming or going, and there's a small part of you fearing for your life. That's a real mosh pit. And like they said in Fight Club, to paraphrase Brad Pitt, how do you know anything about yourself unless you've been in a mosh pit? So I'm not suggesting, you jump into the Volkswagen and leave your family and go on tour or any of that shit. But I would tell you that if you have the opportunity to go to a good metal show, go to 3 Inches of Blood, go see Children of Bodom, go see Slayer. If you have to, because it's #time to murder it, go to Hatebreed. I mean, if you Hatebreed, you might actually be okay because you'll be in there with the bros.
You'll be too busy ODing on Monster Energy.
You might be safe, in the bro pit. But, I mean, get yourself involved in at least just one song. Throw yourself in there. Let yourself go. And have that experience, just to say you did it. That's my thought, at least. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you're like, I got fucking kids, man. What's wrong with you? But I'm telling you, I've been doing it since I'm 11, 12 years old. I spent the better part of high school, college, and grad school going to concerts. And when I tell you mosh pits were my happy place, boy, does that tell you a lot about me. But, it's true. It was the only time in my life where I could take off the veneer, the shell, the parts of me that kept a lot of stuff inside, and just be me, an unvarnished, unfiltered, politically incorrect me. And there was no one there to judge me because, that's the environment. And so it's more than just throwing punches in people's faces or anything like that. It's an opportunity to sort of get in touch with your most animalistic side. And I don't know, I'm an advocate for doing that at least once in your life. I haven't sold you on this, Robert Cooper. You didn't listen to that going, you're right, Radulich. What am I doing with myself? Fuck this podcast, and go run off and tackle the mailman or something.
That would be funny. That'd be funny. Well, I was in one mosh pit. I gave the guy a concussion. That was the prom. It was the prom. It was the prom mosh pit. I got them played. They played like As I Lay Dying, and I'm like, yeah. And then one guy's like, fucking mosh pit, and everybody just starts going in there, starts swinging and jumping on each other. Pretty great. I gave the guy a concussion because I rammed my shoulder into the back of his head.
Well, that'll happen. I've definitely taken my lumps, and I just keep on going. All right, anything on Divine Intervention? Because in the interest of time, we're going to move on. If not,
well, actually, I picked that song because Tom Araya gives his most amazing vocal performance ever. I felt like he was going to pop a few blood vessels. I don't know about you, but I mean, the dude was pretty much turned it up to 11 and was just screaming his heart out the entire song. It's a pretty good song too. I really enjoyed. Diablo is not Diablo. Sorry. Oh shit. You. What did I just do? I jumped ahead. Divine Intervention. It's a solid album. I actually get a little bored with it sometimes because some of the songs just don't really have much of a specialness to it.
It's in such stark contrast, though, to everything coming out at the time. I think that's what makes it stand out. I mean, by itself, without any context, you might listen to it and go, "Yeah, it's like, well, this was, this is sort of a step back from where they've been." But you have to listen to it with the idea of everything coming, including Pantera, with everything coming out at the time. Slayer was like a breath of fresh air. Slayer was like, hey, remember, men have dicks. Just wanted to put that out there, and that's what they were good for.
Yeah. When you do put it in that context, it does get a bit better. Because, hell, when you even think about a lot of the German thrash metal bands, most of them had stopped putting out thrash like a few years before that, and they were putting
I just want to say, remember, big hits of the time were 2 songs from Toad the Wet Sprocket. Do I need to play them? Do I need to sing them to you? We started the ocean. Come on. When you got Toad the Wet Sprocket out there, you need Slayer. You need Divine Intervention.
I know. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's fine. But as an album on its own merit, it's okay. I mean, there are some pretty good tracks. There's some other ones. Yeah, like with some of these later Slayer albums, especially when we get to like some of the newer ones, I kind of get reminded of something a teacher told me once. It was constructive criticism that was still a bit backhanded. It was after I had BS my way through a paper presentation in like 9th grade, and I tried to overcompensate for the fact that I was nervous and not sure what I was talking about with energy. And he goes, you can try to give as much energy and everything as you want, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's pretty obvious, and it's obvious it's fake. I'm like, yeah. Which actually, people tell me that every day. They're like, yeah, we can really tell you were into that lesson. I'm like, how can you tell? It's like, because you didn't sound like you were just rambling, going on about everything. You were focused. I'm like, you're right. Yeah, that's what I kind of feel about like a lot of pretty much after Seasons. I feel like Seasons in the Abyss is their really last true great album until maybe World Painted Blood or Christ Illusion. Pretty much in between that is like, you got some really good tracks and you got some pretty solid Slayer albums minus one. But I don't want to call it the downtime of Slayer, because Slayer's downtime was the time when Metallica started playing fucking Ronnie. God. Fucking Ronnie. Like stuff like that. Like a lot of the, pretty much they're one of the only thrash bands that stayed thrash. I mean, the rest of the big thrash bands, like Metallica, Megadeth, went to play more of a rock style. Anthrax played groove metal. Testament played like a fucking pseudo-death metal. And Overkill went groove metal, too. But they're one of the few bastions of thrash metal. And for that, I must thank them.
All right, so 2 years later, Slayer takes a break. After, a decade or more of putting out, relentless touring, putting out killer thrash albums, being the anchor, keeping thrash heavy, not sacrificing their sound for anybody, they took a break, and they went into the Wayback Machine, and they put out a tribute album to the bands that influenced them, the punk rock genre, not the pop punk rock that people are most familiar with, but the dirty, gritty, really where the whole like straight edge movement came from, where you would go to a Sunday show and if you were underage, they would mark your hand with a big X so that the bartender wouldn't serve you, and that became the sign of the straight edge culture, was the big X on your hand that you now see CM Punk wearing. That sort of thing. The in-your-face, sort of damn the man, DIY, do-it-yourself culture of the punk rock era. It had an influence on Slayer, and they paid tribute to it with a little album called Undisputed Attitude. They covered bands like Verbal Abuse, TSOL, Pap Smear, Minor Threat, D.I., Dr. No, DRI, and the Stooges. I love this album. I thought it was great. Of course, I'm also a big sucker for covers. So we're going to go ahead and play my favorite track on here, one that got a little controversy because of the lyrics and all of that, which, again, I'm not going to go through my whole thing before about how you have to be a little smart with these things and actually think about what it is you're listening to and not just react to, the words on the page and nothing else. So that, with that being said, this is a great song by a band called Minor Threat. This is Guilty of Being White.
Ah,
Minor Threat writes a song called Guilty of Being White. Slayer covers said song, Guilty of Being White, changes the last line to Guilty of Being Right to be funny. Pisses off Minor Threat, gets accused of being racist. NoFX writes a song called Don't Call Me White. Everyone's okay with it. Everything is fine. They also did a song called Kill All the White Man, which, as the people who know NoFX know that the band is made up of white trash, two heaves, and a bean. So, you ever hear that album, White Trash, Two Heaves, and a Bean?
No, never heard of it.
You don't listen to NoFX, do you?
I think I heard of them once. Are they punk?
Yes. Liza
good.
and Louise. And she said, my name's Louise, and would you take your clothes off, please? It's about two lesbians.
Nope. No, I never was a big punk guy. The closest thing to punk I get nowadays is Toxic Holocaust, which are fucking awesome.
If NoFX weren't a bunch of douchebags, and they hadn't put out the latter half of their career, they hadn't put out albums full of crap, I would actually want to do a NoFX retrospective, because their early stuff, their S&M Airlines, their White Trash, Two Heaves, and a Bean, their the Animal Liberation, all those albums are just fantastic. And so like early NoFX is amazing, and it was an influence on a lot of modern bands. Later NoFX is a fucking shame and makes me want to leave the country. So
oh well, Minor Threat's kind of assholes too. Do you know what's ironic?
Well,
Tom Araya is not white. He's not. I think he's Chilean.
Well, good for him.
No. Yeah, I just thought it was very ironic that a man who's not white is guilty of being white. Oh yeah, what I didn't mention about Lombardo, actually, I didn't know this until I was reading his Wikipedia page at the beginning of the show. The reason he left the band the first time was because he told them 9 months before his wife was pregnant. He goes, "Okay, guys, 9 months. I'm gonna have to take a break. Gotta see my kid get born." Then 9 months later, their promoter's like, "Hey, Dave, we got a big show in September." He goes, "Dude, I gotta see my kid being born." He goes, "Oh, well, it'd be really big for the band if you'd come to the concert." He's like, "No, I quit."
I won't be here.
Yeah. I was like, "Thanks, Slayer. Way to be an asshole."
So Dave Lombardo is the Ricky Steamboat of Slayer. Spiritual
Pretty
Law.
much.
Spiritual Law by D.I. Why'd you pick it?
Well, I just kind of felt like it was a pretty catchy song, pretty solid. It was one of the longer songs on there, and I was like, "Oh, cool." I don't know. I think I was just going through the tracks. I'm like, like I said, I'm not a big punk guy, and then I heard this song. I'm like, okay, I can dig it.
All right.
It wasn't like the super 1 minute punk track. I don't know.
See, this is where you and I part ways, honey. All right, let's hear Robert's 3-minute punk epic, Spiritual Law. Enough of that. So
I didn't like that.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, I like the whole album. It was just like, you get the point.
Yeah. I actually felt like that felt like a Slayer song. Like, not Slayer covering punk. That felt like a Slayer song. I think that is why I picked it. Now that I hear it again, I'm like, oh, yeah, it sounds like something that Slayer would play, rather than Slayer covering something. It feels like Slayer would have written that song.
Okay, so I want to go back to Divine Intervention for a second. So have you ever seen the, I believe it's like the CD image, the inside cover of Divine Intervention?
Oh, yeah.
And then it's in the video. It's in the video for Ditto Head, where the guy carved Slayer into his forearms and then set it on fire. Yeah.
I did not see the set it on fire part, but yeah. I actually had out of all the Slayer albums, I have 2 of them, Christ Illusion and Divine Intervention, kind of hilarious. But yeah, I remember when I got Divine Intervention to open it up, I'm like, fuck, that looks painful.
Yeah, I need to find an image of just that, of just the his arms, because that's going up as the picture for this podcast.
Sure.
It's awesome, man. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's not painful.
If those listening to this, if you've never seen it before, Google on YouTube the Ditto Head video, and they actually show the guy carving up his arms and setting it on fire. It's fucking great. That's devotion, baby.
Oh yeah.
So now we, Slayer doesn't really have a dark period as such, but they definitely have a period where the albums start to sound the same. There isn't a whole lot of differentiation between them. And we, this next one, which came out in 1998, Diablos in Musica, is by far, I mean, pretty much anyone that listens to Slayer, no, this was their worst album ever. It's fine. Look, I'm actually looking at a touring promotion. The Slayer, System of a Down, and Clutch on the Diablos in Musica tour. So it's not all bad, but yeah, this is pretty terrible for a Slayer album. I mean, for any other band it would have been tolerable, but this one was just whoa. In any case, this is bitter. This is bitter.
I was just saying that it's so bad. It's so bad that I bought the cassette from a Goodwill and it broke after 1 track.
It just committed suicide, mandatory suicide.
Yes.
Awesome.
Auditory suicide.
Oh, bitter piece. So it's funny. You know, Wikipedia doesn't always get it right, but I find this amusing, right or wrong. So for genre, for Diablos and Musica, thrash metal, groove metal, new metal.
Well, I mean, you can hear some of that new metal in there. I mean, Jesus. Didn't that, the beginning of that track make you wonder when the Big Boss Man was coming out?
It's hard times, baby.
I mean, that sounded just like his theme. And unlike his theme, it got really boring after a minute.
So blabbermouth.net at the time described Diablos and Musica as a feeble attempt at incorporating updated elements into the group's sound, the presence of which elevated the band's effort somewhat and offered hope that Slayer could refrain from endlessly rehashing their previous material for their future output. 1998, the New York Times complained, 8 of the 11 songs on Diablos and Musica, a few of which were played at the show, are in the same gray key, and the band's rhythmic ideas have a varying sameness, too. Yeah, this album was not great. This was one of those where it was like, there was a lot of great tours at the time, and they would play a couple of, I think the one that I sort of gravitated to on here was Scrum, now that I'm looking at it. I think In the Name of God was another one that got some decent attention. But yeah, overall this was, I can't call it forgettable because everyone remembers how terrible it was. But but for the most part, it was one that people were like, okay, well, it's great to see Slayer still out there making music, but do better next time.
Well, it's not forgettable. It's like just one real bad black mark on their entire discography. 'Cause, I mean, nothing about this album was really Slayer. I mean, sure, you did have some of those elements, but the album cover wasn't Slayer. The logo wasn't even there. You know, a lot of these album titles aren't even, none of the content of it is. I mean, there's some of that thrash, but half of it's like watered down with these quote-unquote new ideas. I think maybe it was just the band trying to do something new, and I can commend them for that because, you know, sometimes you do got to try something. But it was shit. I mean, this is one of the two pillars of shitty metal. That and Saint Anger. Like I see those as like the two pillars of like bands that were great out in their worst output possible.
All right, we have a minute and 15 seconds left of live recording time, and then we're going to go into the post-recording time, which if you are familiar with this show, you know that once the stream ends, you can go back when the show is over and listen to everything that was in the post-recorded session. So we're gonna get into the next 3 albums. We have 3 tracks, 3 albums, 1 track apiece. But you definitely want to come back and listen to this next part because the next album was actually released on September 11th, 2001, and maybe you don't remember what happened then, maybe you do, but I was there, and it's funny, I got the album around the same time, so this is sort of burned into my brain, and there's a lot I need to say about it. So, if you've been listening up to this point, thank you. I hope you'll come back and listen to the next little part. We're probably going to go another 20 minutes or so. So there we go. All right, we are now off of the live stream, and I can go ahead and we can move forward here. Again, September 11th, 2001. This is actually a delayed album. Slayer came back after the wretchedness of Diablos and Musica. They came back with one that I thought hit it out of the park. Now you don't necessarily agree with that, but I thought God Hates Us All was an absolutely phenomenal album. It got Slayer, back to its roots, and it was, in my opinion, it's the last Slayer album that sounds interesting. I don't feel like Christ Illusion or World Painted Blood. I feel like they're just more of the same. So story after this, but I want to go ahead and play the song. This is easily, other than Angel of Death, this is easily my favorite Slayer song of all time. It could easily be one of their best songs that they've ever written. Every time they play it live, I go absolutely out of my mind. This is from God Hates Us All, Disciple. Okay. Before I frighten everybody who's listening to this about I am not going to get into the politics of George W. Bush. I'm not going to get into the Iraq or the Afghan war. I'm not even really going to talk too much about September 11th. I wasn't in the World Trade Center. I was in Brooklyn. If you know anything about the geography of New York City, it's Manhattan is an island, and then Long Island and Brooklyn and Queens are physically part of Long Island, and they are right next to Manhattan. And then the Bronx is part of mainland USA, and then there's Staten Island, which is an island unto itself. The World Trade Center, Twin Towers, two of the largest skyscrapers in the country, I believe at the time, were in what they call downtown New York City, downtown Manhattan. And you can, from where I worked in Brooklyn, which was downtown Brooklyn, I worked at a building that was close to the docks. So if you took a walk, a couple blocks down from where my office was, you could actually see, you were like parallel with the Twin Towers. And I remember I went into work that day, and we were kind of, I was a social worker in a foster care agency. And I got to work, and we were joking and everything, and people were showing up late, and the big boss walks in, and we're kind of goofing on her because she's late. She was like, "Yeah, I'm late because there was an accident. A plane hit the World Trade Center." And John Denver, I think, had just recently made the news. He had unfortunately had an accident where he crashed a plane, like one of those little like 2-seater planes, and he had died. And so when she said that plane crashed, that's what we assumed she meant. And someone turned on the radio to listen to the news to see if they could get any more information about it, and it was a large passenger airliner. What unfolds from there is obviously all of the events of September 11th, which I will not get into now. This is a music podcast, not the 9/11 memorial. Suffice it to say, I spent the rest of the day first walking down to the pier, and about the time that I got there and was listening to people, listening to their radios, trying to figure out if, we were at war and what was going on, and there was a lot of misinformation. For anyone that lived through that, that it wouldn't be until much later on in the night that we got an accurate report of what was happening. We were, every 5 minutes something else was blowing up, allegedly, as it happens when things like this occur. So we were just trying to get a handle on things, and that's when the first tower went down. And I remember watching it from where I stood in Brooklyn. Actually watched the tower explode. And I saw the dust kind of come up and the thing come down. And I still remember people on the dock screaming, "Oh no," and "Oh my God." And it's an image that I can't get out of my head. I spent the rest of the day trying to get home from where I was. I was still living with my parents. I was in grad school at the time, and I was working. So I was trying to get back from Brooklyn to Massapequa, Long Island. This is Nassau County. On a good day, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get home, and it took me a couple hours that night. At least I got home. Unfortunately, many people didn't. In any case, Slayer had the sort of dubious honor of releasing an album on the same day. And while I know September 11th had a monumental effect on my life, how I conducted myself, how I saw the world, a lot of things, there was a need for some degree of normalcy in all of that change, and thankfully I had Slayer. It sounds odd, especially considering the sort of music that they play, but I remember walking into the Broadway Mall in Hicksville, Long Island. It's a real place, Hicksville. Like that's not a joke. I was going to say, we had a drama teacher who would tell people, "Don't fuck up the play. This is not amateur night in Hicksville." And I remember there was a girl that was like, "You're right, it's Massapequa." Like, no, stupid. He doesn't mean the actual town. So there was a real town called Hicksville. It's actually a fairly well-to-do area. And there was a mall there, and in that mall there was a record store, and in that record store there was a huge display of God Hates Us All. And I remember buying that album and really latching onto it. And it's probably why I like Disciples so much, because the very first track on there is just a bunch of noise. But it's the first real song, and it was a comfort to me. It may sound odd, but you find comfort in weird places sometimes. And God Hates Us All will always be a special album for me because it was that little bit of an anchor that I needed at that time. So that's sort of my little story about the album God Hates Us All and the song Disciple. The other thing about it is, as much as I love that song, I will never forget the look on my wife's face the first time she heard it played live. It was last summer. It was last summer at Rockstar Mayhem, and she more than just the ticket itself, the whole idea of this woman who was into the Dave Matthews Band and Sister Hazel agreeing to and scared to death, when she went to go see Ministry with me. She agreed to suck it up and come with me to Rockstar Mayhem. And she had swore she was never going to go to a Slayer show. She being an emo girl, she would never be able to handle it. But she was a good wife, and she sat next to me. God bless her. She had to put up with not only Slayer but Slipknot as well. And they opened. If you can picture this, it's an outdoor venue, as most festival shows are, and there's a curtain up, and you hear sort of ambient noise in the background, and it's getting dark as it's later in the show. And all of a sudden you hear, da-na-na-na-na-na. Curtain falls. The stereo speakers are set up to look like upside-down crosses. They've got a strobe light playing. Everything is black and red, and they burst out of the gate. Excuse me. With Disciple. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs the lyrics to that song because I know them by heart. I don't.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember a whole lot these days, but I can remember the lyrics of that song. And and I knew everyone And I just remember turning to look at her at one point, and the look of absolute disgust will forever be etched in my brain. Just I can't believe you're making me watch this. It was the greatest moment of my marriage outside of my children being born. It was awesome. It's just absolutely mortified she was. But, this is why I wanted to do this podcast. Slayer is not just a band. It's a part of my life, and I love them. They're one of my favorite bands of all time.
I feel like an asshole for not liking this album that much.
It's okay. You don't have to like it. You don't have to, if September 11th doesn't have it, maybe I don't react this way to this album. Who knows? But it's hard to separate a lot of the emotion that I have from it, and just sort of look at it critically. But even critically, I thought I thought God Hates Us All was amazing. And I'm curious to see what your problem with it is.
It's 10,000 times better than Diabolus. I kind of put it up probably about the same level as Divine. I didn't feel like Disciple is by far one of my favorite Slayer songs. It is a just fucking killer song. It's very much like War Ensemble, actually. That's kind of how I see it. But I don't know. I just didn't feel like a lot of the songs really hit me very much. I was like, okay, that's pretty solid, but I just didn't wow me like a lot of their older stuff did, which is ironic because, as you said, like World Painted Blood, actually, we will get to that. I was like, I really like that album. Christ Illusion, yeah. But yeah, I felt this was a great return, but not necessarily like a great album. If that makes any sense, like it is miles ahead of the whole album before, but I feel like there was still some room for improvement. But like I said, I don't have
the same guy that hated Diablos and Musica from Blabbermouth agrees with you. He called it another failure on the band's part to take initiative and reinvent themselves. He described King as the weaker and less inventive of the two main songwriters, Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman, feeling that the album followed a familiar direction that almost always sounds tired and forced. Yeah, I don't know how you come away with that, but, again, I'm a little biased.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad album. That guy makes it sound like it's as bad as Diabolus. No. I don't think it's their best. It's a lot better than what we had. It's really good. I didn't have the same thing with 9/11 because I didn't know a damn thing about New York in fourth grade. I told you, I thought the World Trade Center sounded like a fucking flea market. I don't know. I was in fourth grade. I knew what the Empire State Building was. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a really tall building where you drop pennies and kill people. But, otherwise, I was like, yeah, New York. Yeah. I think I saw it in a movie once. As a kid, I once asked my baseball coach what was a pool, because it just didn't connect to me at the moment. Like, oh, yeah, a pool. Then again, that probably explains a lot about me, doesn't it?
Okay, we're gonna move on here. I want this little fun fact here for all you wrestling fans. The song "Here Comes the Pain" had originally been recorded almost 2 years prior to the release of God Hates Us All, appearing on a compilation album WCW Mayhem: The Music in 1999, and was used as the opening theme for WCW Thunder from February 16, 2000 to the final episode of March 21st, 2001. So there you go.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Even though I keep, every time I hear "Here Comes the Pain," I'm like, oh, why didn't Brock Lesnar use it?
Maybe he will at WrestleMania when he fights Daniel Bryan. That's the new rumor.
Oh, is it? Fuck.
Yeah.
You know what? Brock Lesnar needs to fight a sausage. So I think the sausage will win.
Well, my prediction is that it's going to be him and Batista for the heavyweight title, but I've heard rumors that The Undertaker wants to fight Daniel Bryan. I don't know. We're going to get off on a whole wrestling thing here, and we have another podcast for that. So let's go to...
Oh, yeah. I showed up on there once and interrupted everybody.
You were just fine. All right, so here it is, 2006. We're back. You know, we're going in the opposite direction now. Now, we've got. Actually, before we move on to this, I meant to bring this up, and when I was talking about September 11th and Slayer. So, the other reason why I will forever burn those two things together, Slayer and the September 11th attacks, was they toured pretty heavy for God Hates Us All. And a lot of their imagery that they used on stage was like anti Al-Qaeda, anti-Saddam Hussein. So I you know, like, for whatever the reason, whatever the politics were, whatever, you know, however they felt about George Bush and this country, either past or present, like, everyone kind of came out of the September 11th thing, well, everyone except for Janine Garofalo, and it was just like raw America. And Slayer certainly was part of that. That whole tour following the September 11th attacks was very much like rah America, shish kumbah, you know, go kill the terrorists, and everything was like, you know, for the soldiers and stuff. And I remember the shows were fun back then. The shows were, because, you know, Slayer tends to be a bit dark, but it was kind of fun to see them sort of celebrate American war violence, essentially. So take that for what it's worth. So anyway,
that's why they have a track called Jihad.
Yes. A lot of you know, you think I was influenced by that. Apparently, you know, they went right back into the studio again with all of the stuff fresh in their minds. Their next studio album, 38 minutes long, Christ Illusion, 2006. And, you know, like I said, for me, maybe it was, I knew where I was in my life in 2006, so it is entirely possible I didn't give it a good enough listen at the time because of personal things that were going on with me, which are not going to be discussed at this time. So it is entirely possible I just sort of rolled right over this album. So let's go ahead and hear a little piece of it. This is called Flesh Storm, from the album Christ Illusion. All right. Sell me on why you think that's so wonderful.
What, that the song is so wonderful?
That, the album, the Life Fantastic, whatever you want.
Well, I mean, I never thought Christ Illusion was that great. Notice I was like, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I thought that song was really good. It's just like fucking balls to the wall, which a lot of that album was a lot of the balls to the wall. I don't feel like it's as good as, like, oh, we're going to get next. I feel like that's like their return to form, in my opinion. Then again, I might have some bias because that was the first Slayer album I was around for, you know, as a fan of the band. I know, right?
Okay.
Fuck. But, like, you know, I felt like this was a fairly solid album. It wasn't anything super spectacular. The album cover is hilarious, not to mention it was banned in India. True story. The album cover was banned. They had to put something over it.
These things happen.
Yeah, like it was on like you know, bus stops and shit, and they covered it up and everything. Hell, God Hates Us All had got covered up. The cover did. Cause everybody's like,
yes.
You can't be doing that to my Bible, and I'm like, anyway, whatever. I don't care. But yeah, I mean, I felt like Flesh Torn's a really solid song. I mean, hey, they won a Grammy for it. It has to be good, right? No, I know it doesn't work like that. But I felt like it's a pretty solid song. It's got, you know, it's nice and fast. It kind of slows down randomly, which is fine. But the album itself is like nothing too amazing, but it's still fairly solid. I feel like maybe they gave us Diablo some music just in case their next few albums were just okay, so we could just, you know, appreciate them even more, because it's like, hey, we could have given you Diablo some music again. You better be fucking thankful.
Hey, stop complaining or you're getting another Diablos and Musica.
So, that's right. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when you shit on Slayer. That's right. We release subpar material.
Yeah, the 90s were an interesting time for metal, to say the least. All right. 3 years later, and now 5 years ago, Slayer released their most recent studio album, and that is World Painted Blood. Another situation where now I was in a much better place at this point, but I do remember listening to it, and I think my overall feeling on the album was more of the same. Like, I don't remember anything really jumping out at me. I just, like, I listened to it and I was like, okay.
Slayer.
And they toured on this. This was the one where you know, they did the Rockstar Mayhem on this album. So they played some of this live, and it was fine when I heard it live, but I still preferred their older stuff, like, you know, a typical old metal fan. I don't want to end the podcast on sort of a dour note, but I just feel like Slayer has sort of entered this period of, you know, okay. And some bands will do this. Well, they'll just release an album, and it's an excuse for them to go tour again, you know, and get out there and you know, go play the hits. Like, they have to satisfy a record contract, and they have to put out something new, so they do. But it's at this point they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then when you hear them live, it's all about the old stuff.
And they're the anti-Slipknot. I mean, shit. I remember last time Slipknot released an album, I was excited for it. That should tell you how long ago it was.
Yeah, it's been a while. Meanwhile, Five Finger Death Punch is releasing double albums.
And they're going number 1 and number 2, so it's not going to end. Fuck, it's going to be like the same thing happened with Harry Potter. It was successful. So now everybody has to do 2-parters.
We're going to take a break from Rob's disgust with the music world to hear the title track and the last song of the night. This is World Painted Blood. right, so let me. I want to read this real quick. So Jeff Hanneman, who is a guitarist for Slayer, died this past year, and so it was part of why I wanted to do this podcast tonight, was sort of memorialize the great work of Jeff Hanneman. He died of something really weird, like he got bit by a spider, and things sort of went downhill from there.
No, cirrhosis of the liver.
Well, that too. But I wanted to read this. Yeah, May 2nd, 2013, guitarist Jeff Hanneman died of liver failure in a local Los Angeles hospital near his home in Southern California's Inland Empire. The cause of death was later determined to be alcohol-related cirrhosis. Kerry King has confirmed that the band will continue, saying Jeff is going to be in everybody's thoughts for a long time. It's unfortunate. You can't keep unfortunate things from happening, but we're going to carry on, and he'll be there in spirit. However, Araya has been more uncertain about the band's future, expressing his belief that after 30 years with Hanneman active in the band, it would literally be like starting over, and doubting that Slayer's fan base would approve such a change. Despite the uncertainty regarding the band's future, work is still ongoing on a follow-up to World Painted Blood. Additionally, it has been reported that the new album may feature material written by Hanneman before his death. So what do you think about that? At this point, it's 30 years. It's 30 years later. Do you still think Slayer, with the death of Jeff Hanneman, has anything left to give?
No, well, I've actually given my thoughts in my own metal column on forward1mania.com, but I'll be plugging that later. I had to do that, sorry. Kind of what I said in my column was I want them to release that last album. Kind of is like almost like a send-off, a farewell, at least releasing an album, I guess, in a memory of Jeff tribute. They've got a pretty damn good replacement in Gary Holt of Exodus. So, it's pretty solid. I want them to release that one album and then become a touring band. Because they still want to tour, they still love to tour, and they're pretty good at touring. So if they wanted to do that, that'd be cool. But, if they did decide to start over without Hanneman, I'd be kind of against it, but, I'd get over it. It's one of those things like, I have more important things in my life to do than bitch about the fact that they're going on without him. I'll still probably enjoy the music, even if it is kind of paint by the numbers, because Kerry King is the weak link. Really. If you heard one Kerry King solo, you've heard them all. And I love me some Kerry King, even if he is a short, balding, angry man. Seriously, he's very angry. Jesus. But, I want them to release that one, with some of Hanneman's old tracks. To throw Gary Holt in there, let him play some solos and stuff. That'd be cool. Just kind of like a thank you and everything, and a final goodbye, I guess, album-wise. If they want to keep touring, that's cool. I guess I don't want to call them. I'm part of the nostalgia circuit by that point, but that's cool. Slayer's always welcome on a bill. They're always gonna deliver. At least I think so. At least live. I think they're gonna deliver live pretty much until Tom Araya can't scream anymore. Which, shit, he's been doing it for 30 years. Who knows? But
All right. That's really it. I don't have a whole lot left to say here. Slayer, like I said, is one of my favorite bands of all time for any number of reasons. I have a lot of emotional investment in the band, and that said, I kind of hope that this last album, just to say goodbye, it's kind of it for them. Just kind of do it. Get it out there and say, okay, we're done. And then if some of those guys want to go on and make other music, go do something else. But I'd like to see kind of Slayer put to bed after this next album. Kind of a goodbye to Jeff Hanneman, goodbye to the fans, go one last tour around the world, and then call it a career. You don't want to wear out your welcome. And again, unless they do something completely crazy. I don't know what else. I don't want them to keep making the same album over and over and over again. So we shall see what happens. We'll be back in 2 weeks. That'll be January 28th, and I was kind of looking at the schedule of releases. Iced Earth Plagues of Babylon came out January 6th, so I think we're going to start off with that, and then maybe in February we can do The Haunted. That's one possibility. I know you wanted to do Grand Magus. February's got some nothing that's coming out according to this. But hey, in March, before we leave, we can do maybe the new Sonata Arctica. We'll see what happens.
We'll see. Last Sonata Arctica was not that good. I just enjoyed myself and was like,
Well, we got Blind Guardians putting out an album this year. Anthrax is putting out an album. Corrosion of Conformity, The Cult.
Ooh. He's pretty good.
Down's got another EP coming out. Fear Factory's got an album coming out. Guns N' Roses has got one that I'm sure we're going to want to tear apart. Overkill's got another album coming out. Slipknot's got an album. Soundgarden's got an album. Testament's got an album, allegedly, yeah. Whitesnake's got an album. So we've got, it'll be an interesting year to say the least. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this return to greatness that is the Metal Hammer of Doom. Robert, what you got going on in your world?
Oh, podcasts. So many podcasts. Oh, there's this one.
Are you William Shatner?
There are many fiddlers on the roof.
Get on with it.
Okay, I'm done. Okay, this podcast, of course, is on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, which pretty much hosts all my other podcasts, more or less. The Three Beards is going to be back recording this week after like a month hiatus, which should be good because the last two podcasts we've all been kind of burnt out with nothing to talk about. So, it's just be really fun. Miss those bastards. It's going to be great. The Sentai Writer Podcast, or as Mark likes to call it, the Sentai Frentai Happy Fruity Fun Time, whatever you want to call it. Podcast, we actually were supposed to take over the Radulich Broadcasting Network while Mark was gone, but scheduling and internet have kind of impeded that. But we are going to be hopefully back this week, or no, probably that'll be next week before we're back. But got to record an episode on the last 4 episodes of Kamen Rider God, pretty good, as well as one on an anime called Summer Wars. So good. The one that Teasley called me gay over because I was just gushing over the movie. He's like, stop being so damn gay. I'm like, you hush, Teasley. You go in the corner and think about what you're saying. But,
I told my dad.
Yeah.
I told my dad to do that recently. He had. I'm not going to share it because it's not appropriate. But he said something at my daughter's first birthday. He made a comment to me, and I looked at him, and I was just like, you go sit in the corner and think about what you just said.
Yeah, I didn't say that too easily, but he keeps making fun of the fact that I just absolutely fell in love with an anime movie. Like after it, I was just grinning ear to ear, which is funny. But there's also, which is not my podcast, but the Cooperative Multiplayer Podcast, which is on Spreaker.com on the TWNE After Dark page. It's Stephen Randall's video game podcast that he allows me to be on because he needs somebody to fill 3 hours. It's every Saturday night at midnight. I don't know if you've ever listened to it, Mark, but if you ever want to see a poor man just groan at really shitty puns and rambling, it's pretty exciting if you like that.
I'll have to give it a shot one of these days.
It's fun. There's it's funny because I actually bought quite a few games over the break, so I have things to talk about. But I'm not a big gamer, so and there's not been much news lately. So half the time we'll be done in an hour, and then I'll randomly fucking pop in with football, like Doctor Who, just something, just to try to piss it. There's actually one day I started doing Arnold Schwarzenegger puns into Mr. Freeze's character. So great. I was like, you need to chill.
This is why I'm quite the Nazi on Sundays. I'll get on the thing. I'm like, listen, this show's only going an hour, all right, you assholes. We are not going to spend 3 hours talking about nothing. Okay, Rockhold versus Falupu has no reason to go over an hour.
Didn't Rockhold versus Falupu go an hour and 44?
Yeah, but that's because we spent most of it talking about the Fight Pass.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that was actually exciting. Oh, I actually thought about calling into that. I'm like, no, they got their own jam. I don't need to show up.
All right. What's going on with your column these days?
Oh, you mean the column you should totally read, because I'm actually poor Jeremy. This is 2 days in a row where I have not gotten my column in on time. Because I am pretty much putting the monument of my hard-earned work over the past 4 weeks, the top 50 metal albums of the 2013. Pretty much 4 weeks ago, I did first 20, 300-word blurbs per album. That's a lot of work. And then, the next week, I actually skipped a week because I was just like, you ever got in the middle of a project and just kind of, regretted it?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, same thing happened last year, too. I'm going to do it next year as well and still regret it because, halfway through the countdown, I'm like, oh, God, it's not going to end. But this week is pretty much the culmination of that, the WrestleMania of my column. That's what I call it, because pretty much it is. It's where all my hard-earned work pays off. As I'm doing the top 10 metal albums of 2013, and I'm trying to think. I don't think we reviewed. Oh no, wait, we reviewed one of them, I think, on here. So there we go. Yeah, it was Civil War, and then I've got I've got a ton of pretty good albums on there. Clutch was in the 30s. Yay! I'm sure you're happy. Hatebreed didn't even sniff the list.
Aw. You mean it wasn't Time to Murder It?
No. Well, maybe Time to Murder the album. No, in all honesty, I was actually impressed by that album, but that didn't say much because I'd written off Hatebreed. I was like, it's a shitty band, and I was like, okay, I mean, they're okay. Maybe the next album will move them into, they're solid. But yeah, pretty much I do that, and as well as what took me 3 hours of going through every album that has been released from January 1st to January 14th. Jesus Christ. This is ridiculous. So yeah, pretty much that's what's going to be here.
That seems like an arduous project.
Yes, because what I do is I open up Metal Archives, and then I do an advanced search, and I pretty much go every album that has been released. It's like, what's the time
close are you to graduating? Is this your last year, or do you have a lot more school left, or what?
I'm in the second semester of my junior year because it took me 3 years at community college because I'm a bum.
So you have a year and a half left.
Yep. I got a 12-hour semester as well as 30 to 40 hours of pretty much observations and stuff like that for all my education classes. That's going to suck. I'm going to have to log at least 30 hours.
All right.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. My Christmas present was dress shirts and pants. Oh, and a Kindle Fire. And the Kindle Fire. Not bad. But, yeah, that's and the column, in case anybody was wondering, is on 411mania.com in the music zone. It's supposed to come out Monday night, Tuesday morning, but sometimes it's a day or two late. Next week is going to be me rounding up the past, 4 weeks of news. So that's probably going to be late because I'm going to have to sift through Blabbermouth with, a good 1,000 stories. But hey, we got some pretty big shit, Joey Jordison left Slipknot. Yeah. And apparently he did not leave. He put it like that. I didn't leave the band. I'm like, oh. Oh, and Greg Christian left Testament. The bassist. But they got Steve DiGiorgio, who's my favorite bassist of all time. So I'm like, pretty good trade.
All right.
So, yeah,
we are dangerously running into 3 hours here.
Well, good. I'm done.
Good. I knew this was going to happen. That's why I didn't even bother trying to make it 90 minutes and then try to go for 2.5 hours because I knew there was a lot to talk about here. Plus, it was you and I getting back together for the first time in a few months, and I was like, no, there's no way I can do less than 2 hours.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were covering, what? How many, almost 10 albums?
Yeah. Well, and you and I are not exactly, we are quite verbose. All right, my plugs, which is good. You know, last thing you want to do is listen to a podcast where neither guy talks.
Well, that was the Children of Bodom podcast.
This is terrible. Next, please. All right. So Sundays is a 401 Ground and Pound radio show. This Sunday we'll be reviewing Rockhold versus Fulupu, and then we'll be previewing UFC on Fox 10. I'm very excited. UFC on Fox 11 is coming to the Amway Center in Orlando, and it's going to be right at the beginning of the Jonas-cation, as you've been calling it. But my wife is the warden, is giving me a one-night reprieve, so long as she's already had the baby. First of all, if she hasn't had the baby by April 19th, we have a serious problem on our hands. But as long as he's already had the baby, as long as Jonas is breathing free air, I'm allowed to go see the UFC. That was the deal that we made. So my wife gets the awesome award for 2014. In any case, let's get back to UFC on Fox 10. Ben Henderson versus Josh Thompson. We'll be previewing that, and I'll be covering it for the site January 25th. So check us out on Sunday at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, while we review Rockhold and Fulupu and preview Henderson and Thompson. Hopefully I'll get on the next Casual Heroes. We're going to be talking about Monday Night Raw and the return of Daniel Bryan's greatness as he revolted against the Wyatt family. Actually, Monday Night Raw was really good. First one.
Concussed himself.
Yeah, he concussed himself. First good one in a while. If I don't make that one, I will definitely be on whatever ones are revolving around the Royal Rumble, which is Sunday, January 26th. So I gotta sit down and do some work and get up the last couple of Casual Heroes podcasts. I was on the most recent one where we talked about the network, and then Gavin and I got into an argument about Southern style wrestling being whether or not it would be a niche product. So that was.
Oh yeah, look at TNA.
No, let's not look at DNA.
That was a joke because they started out like that.
The Long Road to Ruin made its return last week. Again, thanks to Benjamin Mullen for that eerie but awesome title card. Long Road to Ruin will be back again Tuesday for a look at Predator, and we'll have Benjamin Offutt back with us, author of Across a Corn-Swept Land, some sort of beer diary. So that's pretty cool. And then what else am I doing these days? The Right Hook is, of course, every Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. So you missed it tonight, but that's okay because we didn't record one. But you can always check out previous episodes of The Right Hook here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network when we get around to recording them. So that's it. Rob, it's been a small slice of heaven. I'm glad to be doing this again. I've kind of missed it. So here it is.
Kind of.
No, I very much missed it. I don't know what I'm talking about.
But by the way, one final thing. I'm going to send this to you on Facebook. Somebody mixed Marvin Gaye's Heard It Through the Grapevine with South of Heaven.
I've heard
the most
it.
wonderful thing you'll...
I've heard. If I haven't heard it, I've heard about it.
It's amazing. So there we go, on that note.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us here on the Metal Hammer of Doom. Be well, be safe, and behave.